Call to order the November 17th meeting of the Platteville Planning Commission. And Mary, if you would please. Oh, let's do a moment of silence for all of our men and women that serve and protect us. If we would, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, Mary.
Okay. Chairman Rich Smith.
Here.
Mike Cowper.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
Steve Schaefer.
Here.
Adrian Sandoval.
Here.
Troy Blum.
Here.
Hope Morris.
Here.
All right, have we all had a chance to go through the agenda? If so, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Tonight we do have audience participation, if you would care. No. Moving on. Approval of the consent agenda. We have one item on there, and that's the minutes from our September 29th meeting. Have we all had a chance to read those? If so, I would entertain a motion on that.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Under action items, wait a minute, I'm confused now. Normal
Recess.
state. We do have a public hearing, so I will recess the planning commission at this time and open the public hearing.
At 6:32.
It's 6:32. We don't have anybody to. Do we have anybody from the?
No, we're the applicant tonight. The town is.
Well, y'all can take over then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Melissa indicated, this is coming from staff, mainly myself. I'm going to turn over to Melissa to talk about the details of the amendments on the two zoning districts. Tonight, I'm turning to commission amendments to both the residential estate and the agricultural holding zoning district. This comes about from months ago, earlier this year. Melissa and I met with a young couple who wanted to annex into Platteville in 66, and that's still a process. That's still going through the process. So at the time they asked a lot of questions about what Platteville had for zoning, because they had a dog kennel, a dog run, and this and that, and some different aspects. So upon diving back into those zoning regulations, we thought, well, residential estate or ag holding. Well, neither one would fit. Ag holding, as Melissa's going to point out, requires a minimum lot size or acre size of 40 acres. Their acres is about 6 to 11. And then looking at residential estate, there was some cleanup in there as well, because it states all those lots up there 1 acre or bigger. There's very few 1 acre or bigger. So part of my reasoning is to actually make the code fit the needs of the property owners in those zone districts. Is what I'm trying to do. So I'll reserve some comment to the end, but I'm going to turn over to Melissa now to talk about the details of those two zone districts and what I'm proposing with Melissa.
All right. So I did detail this pretty well in the staff report. I'll just walk you through, so you have a comfort level with it. As Troy said, the first district we're changing is ag holding, and we are starting with 40 acres and proposing a 5 acre minimum. So again, to accommodate that, uses that we're likely to see coming into the town. The second part of that involved the definitions, and you can see what we've done here is differentiate between the principal residential building, agricultural structures, and then storage structures. And right now it's a 30-foot restriction, which is very restrictive for an agricultural operation. What we used in particular for the storage structures is 75 feet, matches with our industrial zone district, where we increased the height for the grain silos. That was one of the uses that continuously was problematic. So I think we're, both, these are reasonable heights based on the use, and they're also consistent with other things we're doing in town. So that's the height changes that we needed to make. We also removed a 900 square foot restriction for accessory structures, which is kind of obvious. There's probably not very many 900 square foot ag buildings. So that seemed like a reasonable thing to do. And what it will require and what we'll use, on a 5-acre site, we're probably not likely to have somebody try to put a building on the entire thing. But the setbacks would be one of the things that would help regulate how many structures and where they would be located on the property. So that was our justification. And then finally, the caretaker residences, we felt were typical in an agricultural setting, and certainly the lot size allows for parking or any of the other impacts that might be problematic, say if it were in a half-acre lot or something. So again, the size of these properties is large, so it accommodates these uses pretty well. So those are the changes and why we did them. Then the residential estate, again, as Troy said, we reduced it from a 1 acre to a half-acre lot. And really it does bring a lot of lots into compliance, actually, with the district that they're in. And then horses, there's like, three items here that address animals. And so we're keeping the minimum lot area of 2.5 acres, and 1 acre per horse. So, and the issue with that is obviously carrying capacity. So again, we're being consistent with our code overall. We're saying you've got to have 2.5 acres for if you're going to have a horse. Same thing with commercial stables. Minimum lot area 2.5 acres. So that kind of cleans that up a little bit. And then private garages, they're a conditional review use, which we felt was like overly restrictive. A lot of these properties, particularly in Platteville, people have big garages, and which would be more appropriate if you had a minimum of half acre. So we're recommending that restriction be removed and be allowed as a use by right. The next one is the next two really are agricultural commercial enterprises and commercial stables. So we kind of get into a commercial aspect in our residential estates. So we are recommending that the conditional review permit be removed for an agricultural commercial enterprise on lots that are 10 acres or more. So you couldn't do it on the minimum 5 acres, the minimum half acre. But if you had 10 acres for some reason that was a residential estate zoning, you would be allowed to do that. And an agricultural enterprise, I thought would be an obvious question to ask, what does that include? And I think how we define that are agricultural products produced on a site and marketed and sold directly to consumers without an intermediate wholesaler or distributor. So, I think that also could include like pick your own operations. Probably not going to happen in a residential estate, but you never know. Sometimes, again, if it were a 10 acre, if they had 10 acres, maybe somebody could come up with that as a business plan. And then finally, the commercial stables. we're recommending the restriction be removed as a conditional review use and be allowed as a use by right. So, I think those are the changes that we're proposing. We have ordinances, 2 ordinances that, outline and, are required, but we don't do the ordinance, I should have clarified this before, with the planning commission. They make a recommendation with the ordinance to the board
Through a resolution.
through resolution. So-
Recommend that the board approve
Yeah,
their
so
ordinances.
they were also given resolutions. Is that right? You guys have resolutions?
Right.
Good. All right, so that, with those resolutions, we're recommending these changes, and I can answer any questions.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm up for any questions you may have. I just want to reiterate that, stem from a discussion with possible annexation and just looking at the properties along the corridor. About 4 years ago, we did an annexation plan along 85 and 66. We evaluated those properties at the time, but with this property, it spurred some more concerns or questions about our code. You know, they asked some very valid questions. You know, they don't meet the minimum size for ag holding. They have a silo next to Highway 66 that they decorated for their business, you know. That didn't mean anything. The barn's too big. So that's why we took a deep dive into both the ag holding and the residential estate. More and more farmers of the side that I know of, my son works for one, that they're splitting off an acre to 5 acres here and there to build a home, and you know, if they come into town, they don't meet our requirements. So I thought, well, let's take a look at these zoning districts and see with this discussion how practical you feel they are, you know, that would meet Platteville's needs. So.
Are we gonna be annexing that parcel down there?
Yeah, Melissa spoke with them today, and they're about to send.
That's their intention. We don't have a complete application yet, but we're close.
Okay.
I'll add to that they really didn't hire anybody to help them out. They're trying to do it themselves, but ultimately they contracted with a surveyor that the previous owner knew. So they're almost there to bring that in Platte,
Okay.
and they want to be in Platte.
I stopped out there a couple weeks ago, or a week ago with my wife, and they're busy building brick kennels and stuff, and they should give us a tour of the whole place. I mean, they're a very friendly couple. They're out of Fort Lupton, and
Yep.
they're just working their butt off and doing all the stuff on their own. And they built all the barn doors and everything in there. So, yeah, they're even talking about building a house back in that property, not, you know, where that little one that's close to the 66. They're gonna build back further back behind that down the road. So it's give me a nice little area, and they got a lot of good stuff for dogs, dog training, and they have a big swimming or a spa for dogs for, you know, dogs with arthritis and stuff to swim and work their joints, and it's gonna be quite the place for Platteville, and visibility along the 66 would be great for them.
Now that property includes the corral over there too, right? To the west.
I believe. I'm not sure.
Is that the Jaspers?
Yep.
Yeah.
Have they opened yet?
No, they were hoping to be open by November 1st, but they're still building things and making things. So, yeah, and eventually she said they want to get a groomer in there. They can have some retail and some dog food and stuff like that there too. So,
Well, that's
Nice
good.
addition.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a long, slow process when that building was built,
Oh, yeah.
and then it got finished,
Yeah.
and it just sat.
Well, if you're like 2 owners.
And then all of a sudden, doors are in and things are happening down
Yeah,
there.
it did change owners in there, didn't it?
Painted on the silo.
Yeah.
Didn't know what that was about, but
Yeah, they did that themselves.
Now we do.
Cherry picker.
Well, that would be a good addition to the town.
So we're hoping that still comes through, and then I know there might be 1 or 2 other property owners out there that are in rural county that may come as well. We don't know that for sure, but there's some discussion about that. So I just want our zoning regulations to be practical for not to cater to their needs, but to cater reason to what the properties are. Because if you know anyone that lives in rural county, you know, they buy those properties because they like large properties, but they don't like to be told what to do on them either. I mean, we have to have some restrictions, some regulations. So not to have junk farms, but I think they're pretty reasonable. The caretaker unit, I really think makes sense because years ago, the planning commission board amended our industrial zoning to allow caretaker properties on there because it helped reduce theft a lot on those properties. And then they'll have a foreman or somebody live on site to maintain the property, which makes a lot of sense. So that could be applied to the ag holding as well, I thought, so.
See, and I took that a totally different way, because I do healthcare.
Hmm.
I was thinking a health caregiver, caretaker.
That too, that could be,
So-
Yeah, good point.
yeah. But anymore, they wanna live where they have their business, so it makes
Oh,
sense.
yeah. That makes sense. I don't know. Our little town here, we've had some issues of late, I know. Theft stuff and
Yeah.
burglary. Well, do we have anything for staff? Does anybody have any questions? Well, then, we can get into maybe approving the resolution too. Oh, we gotta close the public hearing at 6:46. And we'll reconvene our planning commission. But if we don't have any other questions, do we wanna look at a motion on the resolution?
I make a motion to approve resolution PC 2020-02, a resolution recommending approval of an ordinance amending chapter 16 of the Platteville Municipal Code to modify permitted uses. I don't have my glasses on. Dimensional requirements and development standards in agricultural holding and the residential estate zoning districts in the town of Platteville as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So the resolution has followed through. We'll leave it up to trustees to enact it. You guys get to do that in about a half hour or so?
Yep.
All right.
No power to reject our recommendation.
I'm sorry.
No power to reject our recommendation.
Oh, I'm sure.
We do all the time.
Yeah. The resolutions are always scrutinized heavily. Well, if we don't have, do we have anything else to discuss? Do we have anything from?
I really don't have a staff report for the commission. We just passed resolution 2, so it's been a slow year. I don't anticipate anything coming up real soon for the planning commission, but I was talking to Melissa earlier tonight that there are some other zone districts that we're gonna look at, and we wanna do that on a regular basis. One thing that just came to light recently is their accessory structures and setback regulations. They're starting to cause an issue, because in R1, for example, which is where I live, R. Rogers, Old Homestead, accessory structure 5 foot setback, which is reasonable. Front yard is 25 foot. You can't put a structure in front of your house anyway. The back lot line is 20 feet. So if you look at all those properties, I'm going to pick out Rogers Farm, for example. Most of them are fenced yard properties. It's impossible. So that's just one example. Again, kind of like what we just talked about tonight. I want to make reasonable, practical application to the zoning regulations, because we deal with it on a quite frequent basis. Mary and I, and Melissa and the staff. So I talked to April today about an issue that, is just difficult because what's doing makes a lot of sense. It just doesn't meet what's on the books.
Well, I know going down some alleys, you'll see driveways that, or garages that really don't meet setback.
Well, I use myself as an example. I bought my house 16 years ago. I have a 10 by 12 shed. It's 2.5 feet from one property line, about 12 feet from the other. It doesn't meet the current setbacks. So if I want to replace it, I'd have to move it, which I don't want to because it's in my grass.
Right.
So if you look around town, there's a lot of sheds that are next to the fence. Some are from many, many years ago. And sometimes people bring them out on the weekend, I never know it.
Well, it's kinda hard to monitor anyway.
It
You know,
is.
I mean,
It is. So we try to be fair, because every time I address a situation like that, they give me 10 examples in the neighborhood that they're not compliant. And that's hard to address, it is. So we'll be back probably in the spring, depending on timing and everything else going on. So, and if something else comes up,
Well, you talked about, I'm sure, the water smart and the comp plan.
the water regulations were
Yeah.
kind of, we have a lot going on now than we ever had this time of year, because the summer was so slow. So now everything seems to be happening now with the town, with myself and the front office and David, and we're short staffed in some areas, so it's been a challenge in the last month.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of deadlines. Tomorrow I have 3 major deadlines back to me, so, with the coronavirus relief fund, I have to get another spreadsheet to Don Warden, the finance director at Will County. I have emergency management, hazardous mitigation plan, and then there's one other. So there's a lot of things going on right now.
Don't ever leave, Troy.
Well, not to get chatty, but I had to take most of Thursday and Friday off last week because the sewer line backed up, so I got behind schedule on my projects. So I'm trying to get caught up.
Well, it's funny, I talked to David this week, we had a water outage in Rogers Farm, and it was due to a water or valve problem over here on, I think, River. And he said, I wish I knew about that valve when the extension to Rogers Farm went in. He says, it would have saved a lot of time and effort.
He sent out Everbridge tonight because they're gonna do some valve testing over in Byers, because we had a huge leak over there. And I told him, I said, annually, you simply just need to notify the community and pick some streets systematically and start valve testing to make sure that they shut off what you think they'll shut off. So we don't have any records, very few records. So we need to make sure we have records. We document, David's great at documenting everything, every project we do. We have as-bills, details.
He told me, he says, I thought originally that this valve was only gonna affect like 8 houses along River. And he says, we turned it off and everything's gone west.
Yeah, I think the mayor was calling him simultaneously. He's frustrated. Between the mayor and I, we know a lot of people, they always call us or text us.
That was
I do believe Golden is a little bigger than Platteville. I attended the session at CML several years ago, and the speaker was a public works director from Golden. He said when he took the job and they had a water leak, they had to shut off half the town.
Wow.
They had no records of the valves.
Yeah.
You know,
And we're
He said
GPS
now
now too.
at the time of that, they were down to about 2 or 3 blocks.
everything's traced. A prime example is this new 7-Eleven California, which is developed property. The way that was set with the initial 2 properties on there, Will County Auto Sales and the one behind it, we had to shut off pretty much this several block section of town. So when they put in the new line just for the 7-Eleven, abandoned the 2 old ones, we put in a disconnect on their line specifically, so if there's ever an issue at the 7-Eleven site, we don't have to shut off everything within a 3-block area. So, and we paid a couple $1,000 to do that, but in the long run, it helps.
Oh, help in aggravation, if nothing else.
It helps to have records too.
Yes.
Well, the valve that they're talking about on Byers is right in front of our church. And we went to church Sunday and it's all dug up. And we're thinking, what the heck is going on now? Because they had to replace the valve to our parsonage over there last year for some reason. But it was bubbling. We had a bubbler in the front yard. So, well, do we have any other news or anything else to discuss?
Nope, we're good.
We'll see you at church. I don't want to cut you off.
Gavel fell.
Ungavel.
Yeah.
Ungavel.